great to be invited today. I think it's so wonderful. Truly feel that a place like Trosten House and the community hospital and the supportive home care agencies and the ADRC, we're certainly an extension of each other. And we have to work hand in hand to really be effective in the community with those people that we serve. I come from Green Valley Enterprises, and I am the manager of the Trosten House. What I'm going to do real quickly is just go through all the services that we provide at Green Valley. Green Valley is located in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, and we just celebrated our 50th year earlier this spring. So we have a birth to 3 program, a special needs activity program, manufacturing, employment services, and then the best of them, just kidding, my favorite, Trosten. So I can take this up and okay. So that I have this information correct, I have notes. So the Birth to 3 program helps children from birth to the age of 3 who have developmental delays in one or more of the following areas: speech, walking, or physical development. Staff provide a global evaluation of the child and specific evaluations in the areas of developmental concern. The teachers that are licensed teachers, they go into the natural home settings and work with those parents and those grandparents or those family members, and they develop an individual family service plan. The goal for the program is to empower parents to help their children with developmental needs. The program is designed for parents to take an active role in their child's development and emotional growth. And they serve approximately 300 children per year. Now if I click, okay, that does work well. Okay, then we have our special needs activity program, which is very similar to the Trosten House. SNAP services include individualized programming, assistance with personal cares, bathing services and transportation services. Staff plan and implement activities throughout the day. The staff work with clients and families and caregivers to create a meaningful and productive day for each individual. Through a variety of activities, outings, and personal cares, staff help clients maximize their potential and independence, and they serve approximately 50 to 60 individuals a year. Oh, see, I jinxed it. There it goes. Sure, that'd be great. Just a little inside there. Our manufacturing, the best part I feel about manufacturing, at least from my perspective, is if I'm having a bad day or it's not going as well, I can go onto that work floor and I feel like a rock star. Mary, come here, let me show you what I did. Look at how many counts I have today. Just sweet people that want to come and work and earn a paycheck. So the manufacturing or production provides paid manufacturing work experience. They specialize in packaging, assembly, light manufacturing, mail, and bindery. They've been helping businesses with their subcontracting goals since 1968, and they serve approximately 100 participants per year. Next. Yep. And then the employment services. We have what's called employment specialists. So when individuals come to Green Valley, these employment specialists individualize their interests and their needs and where they want to work. Employment specialists expose candidates to different work environments and duties and help guide the candidate in choosing a work experience. Trosten House. So I say it's a party every day there. It's sweet people that come every day to receive programming who may not be able to stay at home safely anymore. Their spouses, their family, caregivers, sons and daughters still work, and they need a place to come to be engaged, to socialize. We are open Monday through Friday, 8 till 4:30, and our programming runs from 9 until 3 p.m. So we offer activities like Maintain Your Brain, exercise, news, table games and gross motor, sensory activities, and that may include travel time, craft and baking. We have a men's and women's group, news currents. It all has to incorporate the senses. We end the day together at 2 o'clock in a large group where we have one staff that facilitates the entire group, while the other staff are at a table assisting those clients with finding the right bingo number or the right page to the sing-along. We play bingo, bunco, jingo, name tense, categories A to Z, password, charades. We do have a room that they can go into at any time during the day. And they can do independent type activities. They want to look through picture books, watch TV, listen to music, just rest. We've had this room available to our clients for about 4 years. Rarely is it used. They enjoy being together. They don't want to miss out on anything. Couple more things. Rob wanted me to kind of touch on the benefits. And really what happens when anyone starts new. They come to me, sometimes it's a caregiver in crisis, and they're looking for services for the day. And that individual, that potential client or participant, I have to be able to read pretty well, pretty quickly. And if there's any anticipation or hesitation or fear, they know something's different, they know they're maybe away from their loved one, the familiarity of their being with their spouse or at home. And I really have to reel them in. I have to engage them. They have to be comfortable. They have to have a good impression. And if they leave after I give a tour and talk about the programming, they may not exactly remember every activity that I had told them that we do, or remember the people that I had introduced them to. But if they leave and have a good impression, we have a better chance that they're going to return. And when they do, I pass that torch on to the staff, and they continue with that momentum. What happens then, when I say we get them, we have them, that we break down those barriers. They become more comfortable with us, they trust us, and you can tell just by observing that they're comfortable in our setting. We become an extension of their home. We become a new support to them, but a support that they trust and they're familiar with. A lot has to do with those clients though. When I started, and what's crazy to me, and not so crazy, it'll be 10 years this Tuesday that I was hired at Green Valley. And the reason why I say it's not so crazy is because it is like a party every day where I work. And it's all attributed really to those clients. When I started, I remember driving into work thinking, any job that you go into, you're going to make or break it. And I was bound and determined to make it. And on my ride in to Beaver Dam, I thought, I am going to be the best teacher, the best educator. I have a degree in education and theology. And I'm going to impart this experience of love and knowledge and empathy and wisdom. And it took about 2 hours after I started that day to realize who the real teachers were. I have learned more about what it means to be courageous, to persevere, to live simply, to not take things for granted, to enjoy the best parts of each other. And that struck such a chord with me. I always felt that I was pretty kind and empathetic, but there was a light that turned on that day. And I attribute it to those early teachers, those people that I worked with those first days and weeks and years that really taught me how to live. They certainly had their bad days and their off days like we all do. But for the most part, this is how they live. They rally around each other, they support each other, and it really has, in order for it to work, we all have to be on board. We all have to be ready and willing to not be a caregiver, but be in it with them, to partner with them in their journey. As soon as we have someone new that comes in, what we see and many of the families have observed is that somebody who was once isolated, that only wanted to sit in front of the TV, that was afraid of leaving their home, they have more energy now. They want to go to work or to school, as they call us. And it really comes down to continuing the momentum, the things that they taught me of how to live, of how to treat people, of enjoying the best parts of each other. It really comes down to supporting what they taught me early on, that kind of an environment. The services that we provide as well, the bathing, it takes a load off of those caregivers. Bathing is something that many caregivers worry about because there's issues with fall for risk. Not only for the individual, but the caregiver. So we have an easy in and out tub that they can get in and out of and enjoy whirlpool bathing. We have transportation, so that's another thing, another area that we can assist with those caregivers so they don't have to worry about bringing their loved one to and from Trosten House or to Green Valley. We have foot care clinic, so the nurses from the Beaver Dam Hospital come in and take care of that service. We also have entertainment that comes into the Trosten House when we go on community outings. So within our schedule, it sounds pretty regimented, but there's enough variation and variety, especially for those that have dementia or have an Alzheimer's diagnosis. That routine they benefit greatly from that. But as soon as bingo is played for the month, it's never played the rest of the month. We have jingo. If we're throwing horseshoes one day, the staff will sign out certain gross motor. It can only be used one time a month. So we really used the last 8 years to build up a repertoire of activities so that we don't become complacent with those typical activities that we enjoy. It does get competitive at times, especially with balloon volleyball and bowling. But just a really great place, Green Valley, from the Birth to 3 program to Trosten House. The best part about that is those small successes, those individuals who I feel have gone through so much in their lives, who have, some of them, been judged pretty harshly. They still come in with a great attitude, walk through those doors, and what's so great about Green Valley and the Trosten House is those individuals can just be. They can just be and know that they're going to be fully supported and encouraged to do the best that they can in those moments of activities, in the tub room, on the outing. They can just be. We don't focus on a diagnosis, on age, on what we couldn't remember last week or what we struggled to do the week before. We just focus on the here and now. And it was because of those early teachers, those educators that really gave me good insight into how to work with them and play with them and enjoy them and find those extraordinary accomplishments in the ordinariness of our days. So, thank you. Am I good? I'm good. About 15 minutes.
So I am going to talk to you a little bit about what we mean when we say creative engagement for people who have a form of dementia. It's a term that gets tossed around a lot, creative engagement. I was happy to hear you use the word play and fun, because this is what we're talking about. Creative engagement does not mean you have to be trained as an artist. A lot of people are worried about that. Oh, I don't really have any creativity. Well, we all have creativity, okay? And this is something that we all need to recognize, that we do creative things in our lives, but they may not realize it. You've picked some flowers, and you put them in a vase. And maybe you put the red flower in the middle, okay? You just behaved in a creative way. You've created something new, right? And it has value because, by golly, that red flower looks best in the middle of the vase. Okay? You get dressed in the morning and you decide what you're going to wear. And maybe you put this shirt on with those pants. But maybe one day you decide to put a different shirt on, okay? And maybe you're gonna put a hat on that looks a little bit new, okay? You've just behaved in a creative way. You've baked some cookies and you decorate them. You've just acted in a creative way. So we do this all the time, and we shouldn't have to give it up when we have a diagnosis of dementia. So many programs now have caught on to the idea of creative engagement for people with dementia. And the one that I work with most closely is called Time Slips. It's all one word, Time Slips, TIMESLIPS.org, if you want to look it up on the web, timeslips.org. And I'm looking at our two folks here from the Sheriff's Department. I'm really big on training EMTs and law enforcement and firefighters. We had a whole fire company decide that they wanted to get trained in time slips. How could they engage in creative engagement with the folks who have dementia, who they have to go out on calls for? You know, like people fall and they can't get up. That's serious. That's not a joke, okay, as you know. But how might they then use this creative approach to make the situation just a bit better? All right? So they might come in and they might they get the person up off the floor and they make sure this person's not injured, doesn't have to go to the hospital, want to spend a little time with this individual who clearly has a dementia, all right? And maybe they see a picture sitting out on a desk or a table or something. And instead of saying to the person, well, who is that? Where are they? What are they doing? The time slips approach would be to think about a story. To say, oh, that looks like a beautiful summer day. How do you think it smelled that day? What would you have smelled in that picture? What were the sounds that might be happening? And you can start then to engage the person in a way that doesn't have any right or wrong answers. That's the important part. You see, when you ask who's in that picture, and they can't remember the name of that person in the picture, then you feel like you failed, okay? But if you engage in a creative way, then you can succeed. So we do this storytelling method, and if you go to timeslips.org, you'll see it, lots of examples of stories. What we generally do is to take a picture, and it's not a picture of anybody that you would recognize. So you don't want to take like a picture of Frank Sinatra, for example, right? Because somebody might say, I kind of know who that is, but I can't remember his name, and then that's frustrating. So you take a picture. I'll give you an example of one we sometimes use. You see these on greeting cards sometimes. This is a picture of two penguins that are walking away from you, and they kind of look like they're holding hands. Well, penguins don't have hands, but they're wings or something. Okay, so two penguins, okay, walking, and they kind of look like they're, so you'd say, well, what do you think their names are? There's no right or wrong answer, okay? And where do you think they might be going? And what's this one? Maybe you've named this one Joey, and you've named that one Susie. What's Joey saying to Susie? Do you get it now? No right or wrong. We can just get into a story, and we can go with the story, all right? It's a lovely way to engage people. And so we train people, and we're in 44 different states and 15 countries. We train people in this method, and we engage folks who have dementia, and sometimes pretty severe dementia, so that there are individuals whose dementia has progressed to the point where they can't talk much anymore, maybe not at all. So I remember working with a woman one time, and she was in our Time Slips group. What we generally do is to get a semicircle, we give everybody a copy of the picture of the penguins. Here's a picture, and we greet everybody and we say, Lori, it's so good to see you today. We're going to tell a story. Mike, we're going to tell a story today. It's going to be fun. So we go around the room and we greet people, and then we pass out the picture and we start to create the story. And I remember Sue, a woman who couldn't speak. She's in a wheelchair. She had very limited mobility. She had a lovely smile. And Sue was engaged with this storytelling method. And so occasionally she could lift her hand. Okay, she lift her hand. And then we put into the story, something about a wave, okay, or a hand greeting, because Sue was participating. We had another woman one time who didn't have much language, but she could say, this is probably familiar to some of you, la 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 la. You know anybody like that? Okay. And so we put that right into the story, okay? One penguin is saying to the other penguin, la 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 la. Are you getting this idea? The whole point here is that we will transform dementia care through the use of creativity, which brings meaning to people's lives and joy. It brings playfulness and fun. And that's a good thing. We also get artists involved. So we get artists who come to long-term care. We teach them about dementia. The artists then work with residents. We've done things like create a whole play in a nursing home. Many different things are happening with timeslips.org. So check it out. And if you have a loved one who is living in some form of long-term care, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, whatever, ask the administrators, what kind of creative engagement is going on here? Or are you, just doing bingo every day? I'm glad to hear you only do bingo once a month. I know people love bingo. There's more to life than bingo. So anyway, so start demanding that people use these creative engagement techniques, because we have evidence, it's evidence-based, that they really do work. And they bring joy and meaning to people, even with very advanced dementia. So, thank you.
So I wanted to just touch a little bit about options for living arrangements as you age. How many of you plan on staying in your home till the day you die? Raise your hand. How many of you are planning on moving at some point before your death? Okay, we actually have some people that are thinking through this a little bit more. And I say this because nowadays there are a lot of different options outside of just living at home, especially as we age, and then we end up dealing with things like Alzheimer's disease and other dementias or other medical conditions. And so for most people, moving out of their home is just not even a consideration. Some people are very successful at staying in their home and doing it very well. But I'm here to challenge you on thinking through this. There's really not a right or wrong answer. There's just an answer that will work well for you. And I think when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you start thinking about what that means. So I'll wait till he gets it up to come back to that, but things that we need to consider. If you can't get it, I'll just kind of explain it. I'm sorry. So Maslow's hierarchy is like this triangle. He was a psychologist that talked about how people meet their needs. The very bottom level of the triangle is basic needs. It's being able to eat, breathe, water, sleep, the very basics you need to survive as an individual. The next level on the pyramid is where you have safety, feeling protected in your home, that you're not in danger, those pieces. Then you continue to go up a couple of levels, and they start talking about as your basic needs, you're able to eat, feed, and have clothing and shelter, you're safe. Then after you have those levels met, you're able now to transcend to the higher levels where you have self-esteem, you feel like you belong, and you can do what they call self-actualizing, where you're all it. It's like you've reached the pinnacle of you won the Oscar, right? So what I have found over the years working with individuals living with dementia is that a lot of times the ultimate goal is to stay in their home, and this whole concept of pyramid gets lost. And so what I would like to just talk about a little bit is about when do you decide to move or not to move, right? So some of the things you need to keep in mind are your location. If you're living in a home, and I've been to places in the state of Wisconsin, that if you have a medical emergency and call 911, no one's showing up. You're on your own. There are places in the state of Wisconsin where they're not going to arrive. Or they may arrive, but it might be 2 hours after your medical emergency. If you're living something like that and you have a lot of medical problems, is your location ideal? So location makes a difference. Are you living in a community where you have 5 adult day centers, or is the next adult day center 3 hours away? So location makes a difference in terms of where you choose to live, and we have a lot of people moving up north, not understanding that the resources aren't up there to support them. And I'm seeing this over and over as I travel. The other part is your ability to meet your changing needs. So if you're living with a progressive Alzheimer's disease, over time you're not going to be able to do things. Do you have the capacity in your home to take care of those needs and an acute setting? So like my dad had this major medical issue and he didn't have the ability to get back into his home. He physically could not get back into his home. So what does that mean? And when I built my home, because I worked on a rehab, it was one step in. And I had a first floor bedroom because I knew that if I broke my leg, I wasn't going to get it upstairs, right? So that's another piece. Resources. Do you have the financial resources? Do you have the skill set? My friend, her and her husband are moving up north, but he's a physician. He'll know how to handle many medical stuff, but many people aren't. So they're moving to an area where there isn't a lot of medical help and no one's going to show up, but he actually has some training in it. So they feel comfortable with that decision. The other piece is safety. At what point, staying in your home, are you not safe? You have to make that decision. I've had people on when I worked so I worked for 20 years at Pro Healthcare at Waukesha Memorial. Lost on my tenure of my time was working in the senior health center, which we did the diagnosis and then the follow-up. I started working with folks that someone wandered. They left their home. It was 2 degrees out with no clothes on, or no coat or shoes. And they would do this repetitively, and they were just fortunate someone found them, but doing it in the middle of the night, and they didn't have anybody in their home. So you have to start thinking about safety pieces too. Decision-making capacity. With like Alzheimer's disease, there becomes a point in the process that you no longer have capacity to make decisions. When you hit that threshold, you remove a number of the housing options come right off the plate. You cannot move into them once you cross that threshold. And so we would advocate, if we knew someone was going to move, that they move before they hit that threshold so they could learn the environment and you could stay in that environment. Quality of life. You need to define what quality of life is for yourself. I worked with a woman who had been extremely social throughout her entire work career. She involved in a lot of groups. When I went to go visit her, she spent all of her time by herself to the point that her vocal quality, she could not speak because she no longer had strength because she never talked to anybody. She was totally by herself. She sat all day and listened to the radio. The Meals on Wheels would come 1 time a day for her. That's the only connection she had to the outside world. So for her, was that quality of life? When you looked at her past, it wouldn't be. But by introducing the concept of a day center, we asked her to go to a day center. She went there. She thrived because she then started connecting with people again. So by having her connect with a resource, she could stay actually in her home and she got better. But the quality of life I first saw for her wasn't there. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to start to define what quality of life is, and that's where the Maslow hierarchy needs are. If staying in your home, you can meet your needs, you have the resources, all the power to you. But you should not consider not moving. I'd like you to think about that. There are some things that become deal breakers for caregivers and other or high-risk activities. Those are when a person's sleep cycle gets messed up, where I've had caregivers who had their loved one was up all night long. And so what they did is they kind of locked the house up and they would go up to a room and sleep. And the person wandered all day, all night long. That was pretty effective until they woke up and found some messes, a fire got started. You know, they thought they had safety-proofed the house and they were okay. So when the sleep cycle gets messed up, you really have to intervene to see if you can change it. Because what happens is it burns out the caregiver really fast. And the caregiver kind of didn't mind it because during the day, the person would catnap all day long. They could get the wash done, they could get the meals, I mean, they could do a lot of stuff because they didn't have to worry about entertaining or engaging the person, but at night. And again, the day center is a wonderful cure for this because you have the person do something structured in the day, they're engaged, they're doing something, so that when it comes nighttime, they're willing to sleep because they've been engaged all day long, they have a catnap. So looking at resources is so critical for some of these tough things. The sleep cycle usually is a deal breaker for caregivers unless you can get it fixed. The other thing is the wandering, like I mentioned, because for like my grandfather lived with Alzheimer's disease. And so what he started doing is he was a hunter. He lived in the rural parts of the other side of the state. And he would get up at night, get his guns, and he wanted to go get rid of the person that was stepping out with my grandmother. He thought she was cheating on him. So he would get up at night and she hid the gun, she got rid of the gun, but he kept getting up and she could not get him down off of this concept. And so he would get up all night long, look for his guns, rummage through things, and she couldn't sleep. So that was really, that kind of wears down a caregiver also. Agitation or aggression, behavioral issues will also break a caregiver really fast. Nocturnal incontinence, where someone is constantly soiling or getting up and have to be changed, that also. And there are some strategies to manage this. I'm not saying you can't manage them, but these are ones that if you don't intervene and help a caregiver and someone living with the disease, that you are probably going to end up with a move. And then caregiver burnout or a significant illness. And Marty talked about this in his presentation a little bit, about the impact it has on caregiver. So as I hear and say, you don't plan on moving. If you don't plan on moving, you need to start thinking about how do you not move? How are you going to address the things that might come down the turnpike? Do you become informed about the different resources there are? I call this the knowledge insurance. You have car insurance in case you have an accident. Do you have any knowledge insurance about if you get Alzheimer's disease or have something like that, what you're going to do about it, learn about it? When you start entering into the world of resources, ADRC, long-term care, there's a whole different world of jargon. There's a whole different world of respite, things you have no idea what they are. You need to start looking at what those terms are and learn more about them so you're prepared if you need to make these decisions. So for myself, over my career, we helped a lot of people successfully stay in their home, and that's what they wanted. But we helped with some of these difficult hiccups that came. Most of the time they've had resources and or they have support like from family care and stuff to do that, so they were able to successfully stay in their home. But people that actually chose to move because quality of life was no longer there, they were isolated, they weren't going to have someone show up to help them, they weren't able to take their medications. When they successfully moved into an environment that meets those basic needs and the safety needs, then they thrive. And I can't tell you how many families when they actually had I had this woman who thought the TV, she was so far in the process, she thought the TV was having a conversation with her. Very impaired, she should not have been living by herself. The family didn't want to move her. Finally, they moved her into a group home, and my next call from the family after we got her situated is, I'm a little upset. I'm like, why are you upset? She says, my mom doesn't want to spend time with me when I'm there. She wants to go out and do what they're doing. Well, and she keeps saying, when are you leaving? I have things to do. The woman was doing much better, you know what I mean? So I guess to kind of sum up a little bit, don't get in a rut thinking you're not going to move. Instead, look at all your options, get some knowledge about what those options are. You need to be prepared to deal with those things, and look about defining what quality of life is for you. For some people, being by yourself all day might be a really good thing. For somebody who's always been social, it's not. You have to define quality of life. And you should think about what quality of life is for you now and then what quality of life that's not there would look like, and define that. So when you reach it, if you do, unfortunately, you know that you've got to do something. A couple other pieces in terms of like if you're working with families, some hot ones that I've noticed is that your caregiver and care receiver relationship makes a big difference. I have found that families where it's like a second or third marriage and they have marriages, only have like a 5-year marriage and one partner develops Alzheimer's disease, I've started to see that that new spouse all of a sudden is gone and expects like the children to help. I don't know if I see a couple people shaking their heads. They haven't had a 20, 30, 40 years of a relationship for that caregiver to be invested. It's been a very short. I found that to be kind of something we're seeing with all the multiple marriages. The other thing is a breaker for many caregivers is when the person no longer recognizes them. That for somehow that's hard to deal with, and somehow that gives them permission to make other decisions. The last thing I'm just going to say about this is that don't make promises. If you're working with someone who has Alzheimer's disease, try really hard not to make promises. I had a gentleman that came in with his mothers. They were referred in by Adult Protective Services because what had happened was the telephone people, the telephone company, looked into their home. They were up on a pole, and the woman, his mother, had been tied to a chair, and she was screaming, "Help me, help me, help me." And the telephone pole guy had saw her tied up to a chair and screaming, so they had called the police. The police arrived, found her, and then ultimately they came in for an evaluation. But when you looked at the history, what had happened is the son, the only son, the husband was deceased, had promised he would never place his mother into anything, that she would always stay in her home. He had made that promise to her. As a result, as she went along the dementia process, he had a hard time caring for her. She couldn't be left alone. He had hired in caregivers, but she was extremely aggressive, and so the caregivers wouldn't come back. He actually quit his job, moved in with her, and then he started taking her out in the view. When he took her out to like the grocery store, she would have a really hard time. He could no longer take her in public because she was so aggressive and she was over the top. So his only choice was, in his mind, was to tie her to the chair, turn on the TV, and then quickly run to the store to get food or whatever he needed, and then come back. He had sacrificed his job, he had sacrificed his whole life because he had made her this promise. Now, ultimately, this had a really positive ending because the adult day service, or the APS, was able to bring in trained caregivers to work with her and get them on, and bring in the resources to help, because he didn't understand how to deal with her. And she actually did do much better. But she was extremely feared. But his choice, because he made a promise to her, and how do you blame him that you don't tie someone to a chair, right? But he had tried help. So ultimately, if you are faced with someone saying, "Promise me this," I always encourage family members to say, "I really care about you, I really love you, I will always do my very best to do what's in your best interest, I will always be there for you." But don't make specific promises about staying somewhere and all thing. All right, that was jammed really fast. Did that make sense?
Yes, questions?
You have somebody that's in their home that's unsafe, and you call social services, and they come, and they don't see them as unsafe because their house is clean, and they're getting Meals on Wheels. Where do you go from there to get help when the family refuses to see that a facility is a better option than leaving her home alone?
When you say they aren't safe, what does that mean in that
She's going to
situation?
be going down the basement steps to do laundry. She's 98 years old. She doesn't know how to turn the furnace up if it gets cold. And the daughter made the comment, "We got to go sometime," when I mentioned she could fall down the steps.
So the one question that always comes, like the individual does not want to move, the question becomes decision-making capacity. Do they have the decision-making to make that decision? It's always, for me, it's always been whenever I worked with them, it was try to honor what was best for the person in terms of what their interest was, what they wanted to stay. But then we start talking about quality of life, and usually that would come around for them.
She was willing to go. It was the children didn't want to spend the money to place her.
Oh, the children wanted to make sure the nest egg was there for
Right.
the inheritance. Well, and that we've had cases, at least where in Washington County, where those kind of things came up, and then Human Services did get involved and did work with them. In the case that I would follow through, and you have to have someone that's going to shepherd the process if the kids aren't going to do it. Yeah, the whole money thing can really talk and influence decisions. And the person had their own decision-making ability?
No.
Oh, the woman in the home did?
She wanted to move because she didn't feel safe at home. But,
But she had the legal capacity to make decisions?
no, the children didn't allow her to. They took over finances and everything.
Well, what I'm talking about is like, would a judge find her incompetent, or a physician say she doesn't have decision-making capacity?
Probably not, depending on the day.
Because then usually the legal system kind of gets involved, it kind of trumps it. But again, a lot of times someone helps shepherding the process helps. I don't know if I know there's a couple people from APS here, and ADRC, if you have any, or anybody else have any ideas on that.
It's not an atypical situation, unfortunately.
It's usually the person doesn't want to move themselves. It's the family that doesn't want to put in it's too hard on them to maintain them. The moving's a tough one. My parents just moved, and I have years of experience and try to help, and I didn't go anywhere with them on this. And my dad had all these medical problems. No less than 6 months, he was in and out of the ER and the hospital and a subacute 27 times. He should never have been going back to the house, but his philosophy is they're taking me out in a wood box. And he would not move, and he did not have the capacity. They had multiple steps to get in the home. And so ultimately, some of my conversations with my mom were hard. Were like, Mom, you said they'll get Dad in the house. What if there's a fire or something happened? How is Dad getting out? Because he couldn't get out. There was no way. The house was too small. It couldn't handle his walker. I mean, it was just totally physically not safe. He cognitively was intact, but he was dead set he was staying. And so it took some really hard conversations and over time for get them to move. But physically, he was not going to get out, and he didn't want to die. So ultimately, all these stuff, he ends up with a big bed sore and a bunch of stuff. And finally, she said before he came home, we're moving or you're not coming home, to him. And he agreed to move. He didn't want to, but she ended up having to pack up the entire house, clean up 40 years through the house, find a place, and move them. I can tell you this, they're happy as clams. They moved in a 2-bedroom, independent house apartment. My mom's a very private person, but she's an extremely social person. She really didn't like the idea of having a neighbor, but what happens is they have 2 bedrooms. He can use his walker. The washer's right in their bathroom. He has a bathroom he can get in. He can get in and out of the shower. He physically can navigate. He's got his TV rooms. He's got his football games going. He's happy as a clam. She's only frustrated because she doesn't have as much storage. But she goes to the monthly department meeting. She's in the card clubs that makes cards for the Alzheimer's Association. She's down at the potlucks. She's everywhere. And she'll say, I really am glad we moved. She said, last year I was very depressed. I bought a lot of stuff I shouldn't have bought because I was so depressed. She said, this was one of the best decisions we made. And the only way he moved was my mom saying, you can't come home because I can't physically help you. And she couldn't.